July 11th, 2015, El Chapo steps into the shower and vanishes. Beneath him was a mile-long tunnel to freedom. Cameras caught the whole thing, but nobody could stop it. His escape stunned the world, but he wasn't the only one. Here are some cartel members trying to fake out cameras in prison. July 25th, 2011, just another night in Ciudad Juarez, Mexico's most violent border city. But it would turn into something that no one in Cerezo prison would ever forget. By sunrise, 17 inmates are dead. The entire country had one question: how the hell did this all happen inside of a prison full of cameras, guards, and locked doors? It didn't take long for the shocking surveillance footage to leak. Here, we have two inmates strolling down a corridor, cool as if they were just out for a walk in the park. They wave off the guards standing there, and then one pulls out a key, unlocks a door, and within seconds, a group of armed men flood in. What happens next wouldn't be just fighting. We had a full-blown massacre, with gunfire, shouting, and bodies hitting the floor. But here's where it gets even darker. Authorities found out that this violence wouldn't be random. It came after 2 full days of partying behind bars. We're talking alcohol, drugs, even girls smuggled in for some fun times. One girl was caught trying to sneak out during the shootout. She told police 3 others had already left, and per her testimony, this whole event they were involved in looked like a cartel-run nightclub with cell blocks instead of VIP booths. Investigators believe that the violence stemmed from rivalry between the 2 cartels fighting for dominance. Some might have thought it was a diversion for a failed escape plan. Now, as for the weapons, authorities found one AR-15 rifle, but a Kalashnikov, 2 Uzis, and several handguns were used in that attack and never found. They led to some bigger questions. How did they get in? Who let them in? And who hid the weapons? Now, that night it seemed like inmates were the ones running the show. The guards were nowhere to be seen until it was too late. They might have been complicit, maybe just fearing for their lives. Nobody knows. City officials scramble for answers. The mayor of Juarez said,
"Only God can guarantee no more massacres."
But the truth was that night was just the beginning. Ciudad Juarez would go on to see a lot more rioting, more escapes, and way more bloodshed. And the next case on this list is one of them.
More than a dozen people are dead after gunmen in armored vehicles attacked a prison just across the U.S. border in Mexico.
January 1st, 2023. While most people were sleeping off New Year celebrations or making resolutions, Ciudad Juarez woke up to the sound of gunfire echoing from inside a prison. At exactly 7 a.m., several armored vehicles arrived at Cerezo No. 3, the city's state prison. What followed would be straight out of your favorite heist movie, except it's not fiction here. The body count was very real. Heavily armed men jump out and open fire at the entrance. At the same time, chaos exploded inside. Inmates were already rioting, as if the whole thing had been coordinated from both sides of the bars. And within minutes, 10 guards and 7 inmates are dead. Fires were set, cells raided, and gunmen moved with alarming precision as if they'd studied every inch of that prison. Not only that, but when the dust finally settled, 25 inmates had escaped, including one man who had been waiting for over a decade for this moment. His name was Ernesto Alfredo Peñón de la Cruz, better known as El Neto, the leader of Los Metzicles, a street gang tied to both the Caborca cartel and, in the past, the Sinaloa cartel. This guy wasn't just a drug lord, but a legend in the criminal underworld of Juarez. And that morning, he walked right out of prison and back into the world. But El Neto didn't get far. Just 4 days later, on January 5th, authorities found him. He's killed in a shootout during a raid in Juarez, ending in one of the bloodiest prison breaks Mexico had seen in years. Now, by then, the damage had already been done, and the prison secrets were coming to light. When soldiers and state police finally regained control of the prison, what they found inside was stunning. Amongst the carnage, they found a setup. Here we have luxury cells with TVs, cushy beds, and one even had a safe full of money tucked away like a private bank. They would also find cocaine, meth, heroin, fentanyl, and marijuana, the kind of inventory that would make any cartel boss proud. All this inside a place meant to rehabilitate and contain. So authorities believe the attack wasn't just about freeing El Neto, but more of a show of force. A reminder that gangs like Los Metzicles still held serious power in Juarez, even behind bars. After all, violence in Mexican prisons isn't new. Many are overcrowded, underfunded, and controlled more by inmates than guards. Gangs operate like miniature cartels behind locked gates, cutting deals, running drugs, and settling scores. And you know what? This next incident on the list is just more proof of that.
Authorities in Mexico say about 50 detainees died after a prison riot in the northeast of the country. Angry relatives gathered outside the Topo Chico facility, notorious for its violence.
February 10, 2016. It's almost midnight when the first screams broke the uneasy quiet inside Topo Chico prison, just outside Monterrey, northern Mexico. The guards, outnumbered and overwhelmed, could do little but just watch as the prison tore itself apart from the inside. By morning, we had 49 inmates dead. Most had been stabbed, bludgeoned, or burned, some so badly that their bodies couldn't even be identified. This might have been one of the deadliest prison riots in Mexico's history, and once again, the cameras caught everything. And again, this wouldn't be random, but a power struggle, one that was brewing for months. You had two factions of the same cartel, Los Zetas, fighting for control from the inside. On one side, we have Juan Pedro Saldivar Farias, known as LZ-27, and on the other side, we have Jorge Avin Hernandez Canu, known as El Credo. Now at 11:30 p.m., Z-27's men make their move, launching a coordinated attack. The goal was to take control of the prison. They never made it to El Credo's cell. Instead, chaos erupts between two prison blocks. Inmates grab whatever they can, hammers, bats, knives, even chairs, and turn this place into a battlefield. Then someone sets fire to the food storage room. The flames quickly spread, devouring everything in its path, including cells that stood between rival groups. The riot rages on for 2 straight hours, and by the time the army and federal police storm in, the damage was done. The prison floors were packed with dead bodies. The aftermath would have authorities combing through the wreckage, and what they found said everything about who really ran that place. We had 10 luxury cells, complete with king-size beds, flat-screen TVs, mini fridges, saunas, even aquariums. The leader of one of the Zetas factions had a private bathtub and a safe full of cash in his cell. Meanwhile, other inmates have no running water, no light, and no space. Some had to sleep in corridors or rent space in overcrowded cells from fellow prisoners. Now outside those cells, police also found 280 food stalls run by inmates, a full bar, hundreds of altars to Santa Muerte, a death-like figure revered by many cartel members, and drugs ranging from weed and meth to fentanyl and cocaine. So basically, we had a full-blown cartel city behind bars. And you can't tell us right now that the government didn't know about this. So the governor of Nuevo León, Jaime Rodriguez, admitted what many had already suspected for years. The inmates are running the show. He said,
"There's self-rule. There's too much corruption. Nobody wants to be a guard."
Yeah, the pay's low, the risks are high, and the control, well, clearly in the hands of the cartels. I mean, the guards are there mostly just for appearance. In the end, though, the prison director and superintendent were charged with failing to maintain anything. Now, the sad thing is, among the dead were people who weren't even convicted yet. Others might have been serving time for non-violent offenses, caught up in a system that put them side by side with some of Mexico's most dangerous criminals. There was this mother who recalled how her son was jailed for missing a parole appointment. He ended up in a riot zone with murderers and gang enforcers. When she finally got to see him, his face was swollen shut from the beatings. He couldn't even speak. Another woman would say her son, just 21, was being extorted inside, saying,
"They charge taxes. If we don't bring the money, they beat them. Sometimes we have to sell our homes."
And well, all these incidents just prove that this wasn't a one-time disaster. It's what happens when a system loses control. July 13th, 2021, across the border from McAllen, Texas, just before sunset, a group of heavily armed men in military gear pull off one of the boldest cartel jailbreaks in recent memory, and the cameras catch it all. Security footage, later leaked to the press, showed what looked like a team of elite soldiers in full tactical gear storming into a government building in Reynosa, Tamaulipas. They had their bulletproof vests, camo, and insignias from Mexico's Navy Special Forces. They moved quickly, confidently, like they'd done it a million times, except this wasn't a military operation. This was a cartel rescue mission. Inside this building, the so-called soldiers faced no resistance. Surveillance video shows them passing through unlocked doors, navigating hallways with ease. One of them even directed a local cop to a particular holding cell. Inside that cell, we have Jose Alfredo Hernandez Campos, also known as Metro 27 or El Calamardo, a high-ranking leader of Los Metros, a violent faction of the Gulf Cartel. cartel. The cops simply unlocked the dorm, and El Calamardo walked out like he just finished a meeting. And just like that, they were gone. El Calamardo had been arrested just 24 hours earlier. For years, he'd been running cartel operations in border cities of Diaz Ordaz and Valdeses, major corridors for drug and migrant smuggling into the U.S. Now, some reports also tie him to a massacre of 19 people, which included 16 Guatemalan migrants who were found shot and burned in an abandoned vehicle. This guy was wanted for drug trafficking, kidnapping, human smuggling, and after years of flying under the radar, he was finally in custody. Until he wasn't. According to sources, cartel leader Cesar Premito Morfin had offered police $1 million to let El Calamardo walk. They refused, so the Gulf Cartel sent a message. If you won't open the door, we'll just do it ourselves. And just like that, 30 gunmen stormed the Attorney General's facility in Reynosa, placed El Calamardo into an ambulance, and disappeared into the night. Now, we don't know if this rescue mission was active military, former soldiers, or just people dressed to play the part. But for many Mexicans watching this video, it didn't matter. It was the most visually damning suggestion of state-level corruption they'd seen in years, and the incident raised an uncomfortable question. What happens when the people with guns stop working for the government and start working for the cartels instead? The escape wouldn't just embarrass the authorities, it triggered citywide blockades. Gulf Cartel members flooded Reynosa's streets to stop police from chasing after El Calamardo. Gunfire erupted in several neighborhoods. Civilians were told to shelter indoors. The escape was a success, but not for long. About a month and a half later, El Calamardo was dead. He's killed during a shootout with Mexican military. Photos show him slumped in the back of a pickup truck, white shirt soaked with blood across his chest. But by then, the message was already loud and clear. The cartel could reach anyone, anywhere, even dressed in military gear, and no one would dare stop him. It's August 3rd, 2019, and when visiting hours ended that afternoon at Brazil's infamous Bangu 3 prison, one of the last people seen heading toward the exit was a young woman, glasses on, long black hair, wearing a pink donut print t-shirt. She looked pretty nervous. Too nervous. A guard stopped her. 1 second glance later, oh, this is not a woman. She's not even a visitor. She is Clavino Dilva, a convicted drug lord, sentenced to 73 years and 10 months behind bars. And this was his second attempt at escape. Security footage released to the media captured the entire incident. Now, at first glance, Dilva looked pretty convincing with hair and glasses covering his features and the small build. Then the officers began peeling the layers off one by one. First came the wig, then the glasses, and then that pink shirt with the bra. And finally, the silicone mask that had been molded into a girl's face. I mean, kudos for trying. Underneath it all, we have a muscular 42-year-old man, blinking awkwardly as if this whole thing hadn't just been caught on camera. So his plan was to leave his 19-year-old daughter behind in his place while he simply walked out of the prison, pretending to be her. But obviously, the disguise didn't hold up under pressure. The guards just weren't buying it. Dilva isn't just any inmate. This guy was a leader in Red Command, one of Brazil's most powerful criminal groups, responsible for drug trafficking across Rio de Janeiro. And this wasn't his first rodeo. Back in 2013, he escaped from another prison by crawling through the sewer system, only to be recaptured not long after. So when this plan failed, officials didn't really take any chances. They transferred him to Bangu 1, a max security facility. But just 3 days after that failed escape, Dilva was found dead in his cell. Authorities said that he hung himself. Now, he'd reportedly been placed in solitary after that incident, far from the main prison population and maybe far from hope of pulling off another escape. March 18th, 2022. It's still dark when the cameras at La Picota, max security prison in Bogota, Colombia, capture a man in a guard's uniform calmly walking past multiple checkpoints, unbothered, unchallenged, and entirely out of place. What the cameras didn't know yet was that the man wasn't a guard at all. This guy was Juan Laren Castro, also known as Matamba, one of Colombia's most wanted drug lords and a high-ranking figure in the powerful Gulf Clan cartel. This guy was walking walking straight out of prison, and no one lifted a finger to stop him. You see, later that morning, guards did this routine head count, and that's when they realized Matamba was gone. And shortly after, security footage confirmed the worst-case scenario. This guy simply just walked out of the front door, wearing a smuggled uniform, aided by at least one corrupt prison inspector who had since been arrested. Now, some reports say the price for that quiet little walk to freedom was $5 million, and he didn't just pass through one door. This guy walked through 7, including checkpoints and locked gates, and not one was closed to him. Before the disguise and even prison, Matamba was no low-level criminal. This guy was a major cocaine trafficker who controlled key smuggling routes in southern Colombia, and even had ties to the Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels in Mexico, as well as local armed groups. Get this, authorities link him to nearly 20% of all cocaine shipments coming out of the Narino region. He'd been captured just 10 months earlier, during his birthday party no less, and was awaiting extradition to the US on drug charges. So yeah, plenty of motivation to vanish. But this wouldn't be the first time Matamba's slipped through the cracks. In 2018, he faked his own death while on medical leave from another prison. Then he reappeared later with a new name, new face, and a fresh round of plastic surgery. When police finally discovered the act and caught him, this guy was in a luxury apartment planning another birthday party. So when the news of his 2022 escape hit, few were shocked. This time, the visuals kinda made it harder to look away. The public was outraged, and Colombia's president at the time, Iván Duque, called the escape unacceptable. As a result, more than 50 guards were suspended, and the head of the prison was fired. But this wasn't even La Picota's only scandal. Just weeks before, another investigation revealed that a wealthy businessman was leaving that same prison to attend some secret meetings in Bogotá, escorted by prison staff like it was no big deal. Not only that, but Matamba's escape also threatened ongoing investigations. He's believed to have ties to military officials, who allegedly provided intel in exchange for money or protection, and so his disappearance put some of those cases in jeopardy. Matamba was officially on the run for months. Then, in May, authorities track him down in Santander province, where he died in a shootout with Colombian police. This guy was 41 years old, and already a symbol of how far cartels could reach, not just outside of prison, but deep within it as well. January 29th, 2020, started like any other morning at Mexico City's Reclusorio Sur prison. Guards would conduct their usual roll call after 8 a.m., but 3 names went unanswered. And just like that, Victor Manuel Felix Beltran, known as El Vic, once the man behind the money for El Chapo's Sinaloa cartel, was gone. So were Luis Fernando Meza Gonzalez and Yael Osuna Navarro, 2 more cartel members, waiting to be shipped off to the U.S. Now, they didn't dig a tunnel, nor did they fight their way to freedom. They just simply walked out through 5 locked doors, with help from the inside, of course. But before this, we gotta talk about who El Vic was. Now, Victor Beltran was the financial brain behind a powerful Sinaloa cartel cell run by El Chapo's sons, Jesus Alfredo and Ivan Archivaldo Guzman. He takes over the job from his father, El 69, after the elder Felix was arrested and extradited to the U.S. in 2017. In cartel circles, this makes El Vic a trusted player, especially when the cartel needed to quietly move heroin from Mexico into Chicago and launder millions in the process. So when he was finally arrested in 2017, it wasn't in a shootout, it was a raid on his upscale Mexico City home. He's given 4 years in prison, and while he's serving time, he slips out of there, unnoticed, until it's too late. El Vic and 2 other inmates were last seen in the entry of the prison. About as much details as officials were willing to give, but what we do know is that 5 locked security doors opened for him, and definitely not by accident. This whole thing was so polished and quiet that no one noticed who was gone until roll call the next morning. Then came the final piece of the puzzle. Captures put all 3 men climbing into a white van parked just outside that building. We have a CO simply opening that gate, letting the van out, and just like that, is gone. Officials say between 6 and 10 people were involved, including 2 deputy directors and at least 16 staff members. Some of these people were immediately placed under investigations. Others simply disappeared. Now, what really raises any kind of eyebrow was the fact that all 3 of these guys were awaiting extradition to the U.S., yet for reasons still debated, they hadn't been transferred to federal high-security facilities. Now, the government officials claimed that they had made a request to move them, but some reports say that those requests either never existed or the inmates had already secured legal injunctions to block the transfers, so they stayed in Reclusorio Sur. Well, until they didn't. El Vic is still at large to this day. And finally, we arrive at July 11th, 2015, a quiet night at Altiplano, one of Mexico's highest security prisons, at least on paper. At 8:52 p.m., Joaquin El Chapo Guzman steps into the shower area of his cell. The camera's rolling, the view's kinda blocked. It's one of those blind spots for privacy. He bent down one time, came back, changed his shoes, and then bent down again, and never came back up. When guards finally went and checked on him, they found an empty cell. All that remained was this hole beneath the shower, a ladder, and a chilling trail into the unknown. Just like that, El Chapo escaped from prison again. Now, we talked about it a million times, but this escape was so neat. It's almost artistic. Authorities later said that the tunnel stretched 1.5 kilometers, and it was all equipped down there with lighting, ventilation, and a motorbike, likely used to haul out dirt and then speed up the escape. And at the other end, we had a half-built house in a quiet neighborhood. I mean, this operation took months, maybe years, of planning. Someone knew the prison's blind spots. They had access to blueprints, and someone had to have the resources to dig all of that without raising any alarm. The footage released to the public shocked everybody. It showed how easily one of the world's most dangerous men had outsmarted a supposedly impenetrable system. And well, if you lay out El Chapo's story without context, this might sound like fiction. He was the head of the Sinaloa cartel, considered by U.S. Intel to be the most powerful drug trafficking organization in the world. He built a multi-billion-dollar empire, moved drugs across continents, bribed his way through the systems at every level, and this wasn't his first time slipping away. January 19th, 2001, after 6 years inside Puente Grande, another high-security facility, Chapo escapes in true movie fashion, hidden in a laundry cart pushed out by a corrupt guard, as one of the many stories say. And at the time, prison life hadn't exactly been that rough. Thanks to inside help, he had access to some good food, volleyball, even women. But when the government finally began cracking down on something, and when Mexico's Supreme Court ruled prisoners could be extradited to the US, well, he decided to leave. Now, what followed was 13 years as a fugitive, running his empire from the Sierra Madre Mountains until he's finally caught in 2014. But again, he's not going to stay put for too long. Following that 2015 escape, Mexico's in full crisis mode. Flights are grounded, national manhunts are launched, and a multi-million-dollar bounty was placed on this dude's head. January 8th, next year, El Chapo's finally recaptured after a violent raid in Los Mochis, Sinaloa. 5 Marines sadly lost their lives that day. A year later, on January 19th, 2017, he shipped off to the US, the outcome he'd feared all along. At his trial, he's found guilty on all counts: drug trafficking, organized crime, murder, you name it. He is sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years. Today, El Chapo sits pretty at ADX Florence, a federal supermax prison in Colorado, often referred to as the Alcatraz of the Rockies, the most secure prison in the US. And since its creation in 1994, no one has ever escaped. Still, with a history like his, people can't help but wonder, could he do it again?